So good morning, I am Natasha Jones. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to be your host this morning. Today we're here to celebrate a very special occasion. This is the launch of Mr. Ronald Harford's memoir, Nil Illegitimi Carborundum. And it took me a while to learn this because I was not paying attention to Latin while I was at Na Prima Girls High School. Had I known what this meant, I would not have let it grind me down. Don't let the bastards grind you down. That's what it means. So it really tells you about what this book is about, the irreverence, the humor. It's so beautifully written. I read the first part of it, and I'm really looking forward to finishing the book. This publication documents the extraordinary banking career of someone we can only describe as a banking pioneer in the Caribbean region. With a career spanning over 5 decades, this book is truly a treasure trove of stories and experiences. We have a short program this morning. I know a lot of you are looking forward to getting back to work because of our late start, but it is something I'm sure you'll be thoroughly entertained by. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Mrs. Anna-María García-Brooks has been a very close friend and colleague of Mr. Harford. In fact, she was the first one of the first persons, along with Professor Brereton, to proofread his memoir before publication. To speak about this remarkable man, the fearless leader, colleague, and great friend, please welcome to the podium Anna-María García-Brooks.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Harford, Mrs. Harford, wonderful friends, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. As I drove up here this morning and had to have somebody take my car so that I didn't have to put my feet into the huge puddle outside in the car park, and I saw everybody parked in their cars, lights on, windshield wipers on, I thought the heavens are opening up for Ron Harford. And you know, there's a hymn like that, huh? It doesn't go, the heavens are opening up, but it says the heavens are singing or something. But I thought of that, and the heavens have opened up for you. And I must start my address this morning by congratulating the country's newest author, Ronald F. Dicey Harford. Congratulate you on the production of this absolute masterpiece. I know that the production of this book was a gift, and that writing your memoirs might not have been at the top of your bucket list. But as you said, somewhere along this journey, the downtime occasioned by COVID-19 provided the ideal opportunity to reflect and to put thoughts to paper. So these thoughts are what we are here to launch and to celebrate this morning. So congratulations again, Mr. Harford, on this absolute treasure that's your memoir. And the theme of the book, Nil Illegitimi Carborundum, Don't Let the Bastards Grind You Down, is so apt, as it reflects advice that Ron Harford clearly followed throughout his life, as he said in the author's note, and which he gave very generously to us, then young upcoming executives at Republic Bank. Often when he gave it, time permitting, it would be accompanied by the story of how he came upon the advice in the first place, sometimes spun with very creative enhancements. And those of us, and I think all of us here, know him very well, so we are very familiar with those creative enhancements to all the stories. For my part, I would listen with rapt attention as I did to all the stories, as if hearing them for the very first time. In a bizarre way, this advice brought me an unusual sense of relief and encouragement whenever I received it, and I received it on a few occasions. Relief in recognizing that someone else understood that there was a challenge that had the potential to break me, and the encouragement that I didn't have to let it. It's said that my reaction to situations would be my choice. I could let the situation grind me down, or I could choose to rise above it. Ron Harford always reminded us how important it was to rise above, to take the high road, to not be drawn into petty, time-wasting squabbles, to be the bigger person, always, to think the long game and to be long-brained, as he would say with his mischievous grin. And all of us know that term. He would tell us that we needed to be long-brained. Always give people their just due, he would say, be fair. Acknowledge their contributions, celebrate them, be magnanimous. We learned that. He taught us these lessons and many more by his words and his actions. Working with Ron Harford was like working with a driven, passionate, yet caring professor from whom you learned every single day and through every single interaction. I had the great honor of reading this book prior to its final publication at the author's request. Truths and facts are very important to him, as are integrity and honesty. He wanted me to read and critique, to be brutally candid where I needed to, point out areas that, from my perspective, should be changed, and of course, to pick up any grammar and syntax issues. Just give honest feedback, he said. I value your views, so feedback I gave. I must confess that I originally started reading the book while seated at my desk in my home office, approaching it a bit like an editing task, not expecting what I was to encounter. However, knowing the gentleman as I do, I should have anticipated what was to come. It wasn't a task at all. It was the most entertaining and enjoyable read that I have had in a very, very long time. I would burst into spontaneous, uncontrollable peals of laughter at the accounts told by a most accomplished storyteller, be shocked and even mortified by his candor in recalling some events, and reflect thoughtfully on his analysis of situations. So, after reading the first part of the growing up years and realizing how entertaining and how much humor resided in its pages, I abandoned my desk and set aside a couple of hours each night, sitting in my bed, propped against some comfy pillows, armed with my pad of yellow Post-it slips and my pen to make notes, and read, to be entertained as well as to critique, to reminisce, to learn of new adventures, and to live vicariously through others. His voice could be heard in every word, every sentence, every paragraph that was written. The experience was like stepping back in time and imagining what life might have been like in the 1940s and 1950s, here in Port of Spain, as well as in Guyana and other parts of the Caribbean. It was visualizing myself in some of the situations in which he found himself and wondering, what might I have done? It was a remarkable stroll down memory lane. It seemed that adventure followed him, or maybe he just found adventure in all that he did. I think that's what it is. He always told us to have fun doing our work and to spend time exploring wherever we went, learning the history of places, whether on business or on pleasure. The experience of reading this book was akin to listening to him tell the stories himself. The expressions are authentically his. This book is Ron Harford. He is so well-traveled and so well-read and has visited so many parts of the world that when he speaks about them, his contributions are from actual experiences. I remember that when I had to travel to Petit Martinique for the opening of our branch there, he told me to take the ferry, which was really a pirogue in disguise, and go across to PSV Island and drive around in the golf cart to see where the movie stars stay when they visit. Of course, I did it. I follow instructions well. So my husband would disagree, but I do follow instructions well. And I drove around, and I missed Michael Jackson by a week. My loss. He told me, don't be surprised when the plane is landing in Carriacou to see men running helter-skelter out onto the tarmac to shoo away the goats so that the plane could land. And he was correct. It happened exactly as he described it in Carriacou. When my sons were children, and I told him that Jerry and I were taking them to the south of England on holiday, he told me to make sure and take them to pick strawberries, to run in the fields, and to walk around Stonehenge. And for each of these recommendations that he would make, there would always be a wonderfully amusing story attached. During my reading of this book, one night around 11:30, could have been close to midnight, after drying my eyes, having emerged from a fit of uncontrollable laughter from one of the humorous quips, and I think I disturbed Jerry, and he was wondering what on earth, was I dreaming? Was I going crazy? Because I just burst out laughing, and he was fast asleep. I decided to send a WhatsApp message to Mr. H, telling him just how much I was enjoying the book and what a delightful task he had given to me. Having sent it and realizing the lateness of the hour, I hoped that his phone was silenced, as my intention certainly was not to awaken him at Allison at that time. It was just to reach out to say, this is so much fun, thank you. Of course, I saw from the two little ticks on the WhatsApp message the next day that he had read them. And I knew that he would have been amused by the feedback. To say that I enjoyed one chapter more than another would be an untruth. But while the growing up years, the apprentice years, and the journeyman years intrigued me and sparked my imagination immensely, it was the chapters on becoming CEO and the master years that I connected with the best. Obviously because I related to those legs of the journey along with all the other staff at Republic Bank at the time. That story of the Barclays manager who gave him that sage advice in Latin, which now forms the theme of these memoirs, and many other stories with which he regaled us during our time, some of which are happily contained in this book, helped in their own way to build all of us at Republic Bank, to mold us into the Republic culture, and I dare say to shape the culture itself. I remember thinking that his words will live on when, after a monthly sales meeting, sometime in 2006, I think, Derwin said to the team, as the chairman would say, go and make us $1. Remember that, Derwin? So Mr. H always said that to us. What are you doing to make me $1? What are you doing to make $1 for the bank? Stories are such an integral part of the shaping of organizational culture, of transmitting and sharing history, of building bonds of friendship that endure, of sharing who you are, of allowing people to see you, really see you beyond the facade. And as you would read his memoirs, Ron Harford has had no qualms about letting people see him. When you see him, that's what you get. What you see is what you get with him. He strategizes and plans for the future, but he doesn't play mindless games. I've always appreciated that. He is focused and pointed and would shoot 10 questions at you before you could answer the first. And there's a funny little story that I would tell. There was this lady, he was the chairman of NCB Grenada, and there was this poor lady, a supervisor, I think. She would be mortified every time he came to the board meeting, which was every month, because he would ask her questions, and poor lady, she just didn't know how to answer them. She would get sick. So after the first couple of times, she decided to absent herself from head office whenever the board meeting would take place, because she was just so afraid. But you get used to that. He will fire these questions at you, and he wants to know. He genuinely wants the answers, and he genuinely wants to engage you. It's also fascinating the impact stories of events can have on your life and on your actions. His accounts of how he found the old letters from Colonial Bank and took the initiative to protect them, hiding them safely at the back of the bank's vault, and having the audacity to write on the box that they should not be moved by order of Ronald F. Harford. That was a tremendous inspiration to me. I was amazed that someone so young and so relatively junior could be so audacious and authoritative. What a leader. The letters, of course, now form part of the UWI's collection and are preserved for future generations to read. I learned a few lessons from that story, though. I learned about genuine initiative, foresight to see the future and to see the value of something that might have been underestimated. I learned about the importance of protecting and preserving, and at the right time, celebrating that which has been a part of our history, of who we were, who we are, and who we could become. But perhaps the most important and impactful lesson for me was that regardless of who you are or what your status might be, we each have a voice. And we can take action and we can take ownership. We can make decisions and we don't always have to ask for prior approval. Sometimes just asking for forgiveness afterwards is enough. He taught me that too. He would just do it. You'll ask for forgiveness afterwards, and I do that. I have done that a lot. So, Mr. H, many of these lessons guided my life both at the bank and outside of the bank, and I thank you very much for them. Apart from being a flawless, ingenious, and entertaining storyteller, Ronald F. Harford is a true Caribbean legend, and the stories contained in the pages of these memoirs are rich and a veritable treasure. It's a treasure trove of lessons for those who are young professionals and not so young professionals. There's lots to learn. Lessons on how to dream and to go after your dream. Lessons in resilience, lessons in patience, and playing the long game. Lessons in dealing with difficult people. Lessons in humility, acknowledging that you don't know, and the openness to learn from everyone. The story about the messenger in, was it Rio Claro? That'll be an entertaining one for those of you who have not yet read that. Lessons in being gracious and recognizing someone else's strength and celebrating their success. Magnanimous. Putting in the effort above and beyond what is expected of you. Recognizing and nurturing talent. In today's business world, considerable time, effort, and financial resources are invested in teaching supervisors, managers, and even executives how to be mentors. In his time, Ron Harford did that naturally. It's who he is. And while it's not said explicitly in the book, the reader gets the message from his actions. Like his predecessors, especially Dunbar McIntyre and John Jardim, Victor Muti, Ron Huggins, and Lloyd Samaru, all of whom I've had the pleasure of working alongside, Ron Harford has been a huge contribution to the growth and success of the Republic Bank that we know today. He scoffs at being called a visionary, but I think he is. Very much a family man whose wife, children, grandchildren, siblings, parents, and relatives come first. But I have to say that I sometimes felt that Republic Bank tied for first place in his heart. Alison gave a little nod there. That enduring love for the organization was compelling and it was infectious. Those of us who have worked closely with him have felt it. We've lived it. and we've embraced it ourselves. Nigel, who's not here today, unfortunately, David, Jackie, Karen, Tony, Derwin, Robert Ainsworth, and so many others. We understand that. We understand that connection. And so, Mr. H, as your memoirs are a treasure and a must-read. Thank you for sharing your wonderful journey and adventures with the world through them. And I thank you also for the honor of being part of your journey. I shall never tire of reading this book. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna-María. And apart from Mr. Harford seeing people, from him being seen, obviously he sees people because the long-lasting relationships that he's created is true fact and testament to why all of us are here today and enjoying his book. And also the relationship he has with the next speaker, who unfortunately, because of the rain, couldn't be here. So she has sent her speech via email, and it will be read by Kathryn Hosein, Mr. Harford, and Mrs. Harford's daughter. But I'll just tell you a little bit about the relationship that they created. Always being one to ensure that history was well documented and preserved, a young bank employee, as Anna-María had said, Ronald Harford, came across boxes of colonial bank correspondence dating back to the 1830s, destined for the trash pile. He rescued these boxes from certain destruction, and now I know put his name on it and said, don't touch, and he donated them to the library at the University of the West Indies. It was after this act that our next speaker, who unfortunately couldn't be here, first heard of Mr. Harford. The pair would go on to work with each other over several activities at UWI, St. Augustine campus, as well as become colleagues on the board of Arthur Lok Jack Global School of Business for several years. So I'm talking about Bridget Brereton, Professor Emerita of History at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. So kindly, Kathryn Hosein has decided to do the honors and read her speech. Thank you so much.
So clearly you have to imagine that this is being read by somebody far brighter than myself. I first became aware of Ron Harford when I heard how, as a very young man working in the Port of Spain branch of Barclays Bank DCO, he'd rescued these now famous boxes containing correspondence dating back to the 1830s. This was from the Colonial Bank, Barclays' predecessor here, and included valuable historical source materials. He saved them from certain destruction and later donated them to the UWI Library. He tells this story briefly in his memoir. Naturally, this convinced me he was a most unusual banker. Much later, I learned and saw for myself what a consistent, generous, and thoughtful friend of the university, including the Arthur Lok Jack Global School of Business, he had been over many decades. Now, Ron's memoir is the record of his life, mainly spent in banking, with what became Republic Bank, but I'm not here to talk about that. Full disclosure, I don't even bank there, except for a pathetically small account at the UWI branch. Other disclosure, his daughter does bank there. Instead, I want to think about what memoirs are and why they are valuable. The word comes from the same root as memory, so a memoir is a person's written memories of his or her life. Some memoirs deal only with a little bit of their life, say a memoir of one's youth or their coming of age. Ron's deals with his whole life, from childhood to the present. In fact, he goes further back to talk about his Grenadian forebears. Grenadian people aren't easy. There's a very funny scene in the book where Ron has a dispute about a piece of land in Blanchisseuse with the late Carl Hudson Phillips. It ends well only because they are both of Grenadian heritage. Anyway, as it covers Ron's whole life, it could equally be called an autobiography, a biography of oneself. In this kind of writing, the author crafts his own version of his story. It's his truth, his choice of what he remembers and how, and of what he chooses not to remember, or at least not to write about. It's how he orders his memories. Usually someone who's no longer young looks back and reflects on his life's journey, its good and bad episodes. And nearly all memoirs or autobiographies, including Ron's, are like this. So a memoir or autobiography is very different from a biography, where someone's life is researched and written by someone else. Often the subject is safely dead, which thank goodness he's not, my interjection. With most biographies, an effort is made to achieve objectivity. As Oliver Cromwell told the painter who was doing his portrait, it must be warts and all. We don't look for objectivity in a memoir, where we know that the author has chosen what memories to write about and how. This, of course, doesn't mean that things have simply been made up, just that the author is free to shape his memories as he thinks best. People have been writing memoirs for centuries, all over the world and for many different reasons. Often, they are not meant ever to be published or even to be read by anyone, or maybe only by family. Perhaps the reason may be to reflect on your life, to make sense of it, to convey to your children and your grandchildren what your life was like and where you came from, or even just to meditate on your spiritual journey, as many memoirs have been written for religious purposes. People in public life, overwhelmingly men until recently, tend to write intending their memoir to be published and so to be read by a much wider group. Politicians are especially likely to write memoirs, often based on diaries they kept when they were involved in public life. I don't know if Ron used diaries as a source or just relied on his memory. Personal interjection, no diaries as far as I know. One motive for this kind of memoir is clearly to justify one's life, to defend and big up one's achievements, maybe put down one's opponents, and some recent memoirs from prominent local politicians seem to fit that description. Others who write memoirs intended for publication want to document their life and achievements so that others can learn from them and to contribute to the history of the institutions they have been part of. This is sort of archival in purpose, and Ron's book best fits into this category. I'm a historian, remember we're pretending here. So I want to emphasize how valuable memoirs and autobiographies are as sources. Even unpublished memoirs, handwritten, typed, word processed, can often be found in family possessions or in archives and libraries if they're published like Ron's, and they are, of course, become easily accessible. Memoirs are among the many kinds of written sources on which we can base the study of the past. Needless to say, historians never read memoirs uncritically. We know all too well that they are carefully crafted representation of someone's life. So we always seek corroboration from other sources. And if we can't find any, we are cautious in how we incorporate material from a memoir into our research. Nevertheless, memoirs have always been recognized as important primary sources for any historian. As I said, politicians, and more generally men who have been in public life, are especially likely to publish memoirs. Business people have been less so inclined, but in the subfield of business history, and more generally economic history, memoirs and diaries by industrialists, merchants, financiers, and bankers have been very important, and some even go back to the 1500s for European history. Locally, we've begun to see the publication of memoirs or biographies which are partly memoirs by prominent businessmen, the late Anthony Sabga, and Sidney Knox, for example, and Ken Gordon happily still with us. My spies even tell me that one by or about Mr. Lok Jack is in the pipeline too. As a banker, Ron's memoir fits in with this trend and provides a view of the financial side of business development in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean over the last half century. So speaking now as a historian, pretending again, as well as a friend and admirer of Ron, this memoir is very welcome. It makes a valuable contribution to understanding the economic history of the nation and the region since independence. It's also a lively read with the unmistakable Harford voice and larger-than-life personality coming through very clearly. I congratulate Ron and Republic Bank on the appearance of this book and hope that many people read it. And that's the end of hers, and I'm not going to say much because anyone who knows Harfords knows that we are criers. But I was very honored to have the opportunity to say something, and I just want to say how proud I am of my dad.
I'm a crier too, so my eyes are welling up. Wasn't that so beautifully shared? Thank you, Kathryn, so much. We can see that humor really runs through the family. I think Professor Brereton would be very, very pleased. So at this time, we'll hear a few words from someone who has had a key instrumental role in bringing this publication to fruition. As managing director of Paria Publishing, Alice Besson worked closely alongside Mr. Harford, providing research, writing, and editing service. I understand that the theme is volare, which I learned means to fly. So folks, buckle up and get ready to take off.
Probably you wouldn't need this, right? Great acoustics at Arthur Lok Jack Global School of Business. Good morning, everybody again. So, if we could have the other picture up, please. I had the great pleasure to work with Ronald on this book. And during the course of the production, Ronald said, it can't only be me talking in this book. You have to talk to some other people. And it was, of course, in the middle of COVID, and we couldn't even meet anybody. And so I interviewed a number of his former colleagues, business colleagues, friends, family members on the phone. He asked me, just ask them to tell you a story of what we were doing. Well, would you believe it? Most of them told a story about flying in little rinky-dink planes across the Caribbean. You know what I mean, right? These things here of this very happy-looking lady behind the hair, duct tape, things shaking, pilot drunk. Well, anyways, I thought this story, I really can't tell that by myself. Now, we have some survivors of that era, and I would like to call them on stage and do some readings of the book about flying in little rinky-dink planes across the Caribbean. So please come on stage, Jacqueline Quamina, Derwin Howell, David Dulal-Whiteway, Mario Affonso, and Gregory Thomson. Round of applause for our survivors. Mario, let's talk to you first. One day, Ronald arranged to go to Tobago to explain the rollout to a branch manager there. To Mario Afonso's total shock, there on the tarmac stood a little one-engined four-seater propeller machine. It was a little plane that all bankers shared for transport between Tobago and Trinidad. Mario?
Yes, and the plane that I'm seeing there it looks like a jet compared to what my experience was. It was just it was 1978-79. It was a plane used by the Light Aeroplane Club, shared by Oli Banks. Ron, obviously, for want of either cutting costs, decided that that was going to be the plane that we were going to use to fly to Tobago. A day very much like today, rainy, and if you know, we had the options of Arawak Airlines at the time and maybe Biwi. But suffice it to say, I sat down in total fright and watched Ron Harford like a child in the plane, fearless, enjoying himself. We went to Tobago, we visited a branch, had lunch with Carl Chatu, the manager at the time, and talked our business. Then we had to fly back. By the time I got back to Trinidad, I was so scared out of my britches, I don't think I ever wanted to travel after that. I got a long-lasting fear of flying out of that, from which I never really recovered. But that was another side of Ron Harford, what I am getting you into. I am comfortable with it, and I am enjoying your discomfort. He used to have this Dennis the Menace little smile on his face. He knows you are uncomfortable, and he's enjoying it. And you are miserable, and vexed with him because he's enjoying the fact that you are miserable. But that was Ron Harford. He has this little childishness in him, and no doubt he still does.
Thank you, Mario. Now, one thing that everybody seemed to agree on, who I talked to, was that if you are traveling with Ronald and you walk through an airport, you had to run to keep up with him. Nobody walked as fast as Ronald. David Dulal.
Thank you. So we always joke about traveling with Ronald. Ronald is one busybody. Going through an airport with him, we were always rushing to keep up with Ronald. He would be teaming going through the airport. After 9/11, they had all these additional security checks. And you could imagine, hundreds of people lining up. So like a good soul, I lining up too. Ronald grabbed me out of the line and he says, "That's okay for them. But they're not supposed to treat people like us this way. Let's go," right?
Thank you, David. But honestly, how did Ronald get his colleagues to climb into these sardine tins? I'm happy to see your daughter here, Jacqueline, but there's a story here as well. Jacqueline?
Thank you, Alison. We were going to St. Vincent to look at a bank, and this is one of many trips. It was early in the morning, and we were going on a private plane. We went to the old airport at Piarco, myself, Gregory Thomson, and Ron Harford. When I saw the plane that we were going in, a little yellow thing, I thought, my God, we are going in that? Look at the size of it. And then I thought, I have a daughter at home. I really shouldn't be going on a plane like that. So I looked at Gregory, waiting for him to say something, but he didn't. So we went. Peer pressure. But I have never been so close to the clouds before in that little yellow plane with 4 seats.
Thank you. So now we know it's peer pressure, right? Now, one person who had a really great story couldn't he be here with us today, which is Richard Vasconcelos. And so I will just quickly read it because it's really cute. You have to read the full story in the book, of course. Flying back from a branch visit to Linden in Guyana, the pilot tried to find Ogle, the airport there, without radar or GPS. Ronald instructed his colleagues Kamala Singh, Karen Yipchak, and Richard Vasconcelos to look out the windows to find the airport in the misty darkness settling. Eventually, they spotted Ogle and landed, brushing the tops of the sugarcane fields. A member of the long-suffering team from Trinidad stepped off the plane and, kissing the ground, said, "Thank you, Lord." And then there's the famous story of Gregory Thomson. Now, he is the unfortunate soul who was dragged by Ronald across the Atlantic twice in one day. Gregory.
Well, at least this story doesn't deal with the number of times I traveled on planes like that with Ron. Not with you, Mario, but many times we had to travel like that. Actually, he did drag me twice across the Atlantic. We flew from Trinidad to London, arriving early in the morning in London. Of course, we had to stay in a hotel. We had a day room in a hotel. In those days, we were extravagant. We stayed at the Hilton Park Lane, I think it was. Of course, you only spent about an hour there, but we had to go there to freshen up. And we went straight to meetings with Barclays. They were contemplating coming out of the Caribbean, and we wanted to see if we could buy their interest in the Caribbean. Of course, they were very gung-ho, yes, we'll deal with it, we'll listen to you. Immediately after that meeting, at 3 or 4 o'clock, we were catching a flight from London to go to Toronto, and arrived in Canada about 6 o'clock in the afternoon of that same day. When you're working with Ron, time is of the essence. And that is very true because we always traveled on a weekend, either to come back from the trip or to go, because we had work to do in the office. And so Mondays were not a day you could travel, or Tuesdays or Wednesdays, you know. The next day we had a meeting with CIBC, actually, but I know, Ron, you had the book says Royal Bank. We had a meeting with CIBC to try and see if we could buy CIBC in the Caribbean. So the first day we tried to buy Barclays, the next day CIBC. And Ron, I don't know if you could remember, but in that trip, we also went to see Scotia. We spoke with a red-haired guy, I can't remember, a Scottish guy. Of course, they said they were not interested, they would not come to the Caribbean, it's the best place they could be, you know. Well, this was 2000, not, 2020. As Ronald said, it was action in the tail.
Thank you. On another occasion, coming back from Barbados with Roop, Derwin Howell, and Charles Moutet, here's what happened. Just fasten your seatbelts. Derwin?
Thank you. So we're coming back from a board meeting, get to the airport, and Carl, beware at the time, Carl, I think it was, cancel our flight. Ron, not to be daunted, picks up his phone, calls Bizzy. So Bizzy, we get blank from Carl, we need to borrow the plane. So Bizzy said, yeah, no problem, the pilot just come back, go up to the airport. When we got to the tarmac, the plane was about that size. Brand new, actually, eh? Still had the plastic on the seats kind of thing. A Baron, I think it was Bizzy. So it's a kind of couch seat in the back, one in the middle, facing backwards, and the other seat is with the pilot. So it's Roop, myself, Ron, and Charles. Roop, being the adventurous one, he jumps into the pilot seat, shotgun. So we take off, and just as we get to about 3,000 feet, plop, one loud sound, and then like all hell breaks loose. Now this is memories, Ron's memories, so I'll read Ron's memories of it. The pilot says, what's going on? The plane is decompressing. The window is blown out, Ron says. So now, recognize that when the window is closed, the place is very silent. When the window is open, you're hearing the engine outside, so it's like hell. Ron decided, so the pilot circles calmly, while all of us in the back panicking, and he lands the plane. So Ron, anxious to get back home, so when we're taking off again, pilot says, well, they have to bring an engineer to recertify the plane. Well, go and get an engineer. So I told Ron calmly, I said, Ron, I believe in karma. Carl Blancas, this happened, I sleeping in Barbados tonight. Ron was quite prepared to jump back on the plane and take off again. Anyhow, we had to go and find a hotel, and Ron, busybody as he was, 5 o'clock in the morning, he was back at the airport. I waited until the 10 o'clock flight.
Thank you, Derwin. So these are some of the stories of flying all over the Caribbean in little rinky-dink planes. You will have to, of course, read the book to get more and all and full stories. I just leave you with a little taste of Ronald sitting in under an umbrella in a leaking plane flying to Suriname, or how David had to fit into a toilet of a plane coming back from the Cayman Islands, and many other weird adventures. So thank you all for contributing to the book, and for living to tell the tale, of course. Thank you.
Welcome move to this, Gypsy Kings, Bolare means to fly and survive it. Thanks to Alice and the crew. So finally, we've come to the part of the program we've all been waiting for. Let's now hear from the man of the hour as he reads an excerpt from his memoir, Nil Illegitimi Carborundum. Today, we get the opportunity to hear in its truest sense a first-hand account of the personal and professional life of a true revolutionary, even if it's just a taste. But I'm sure it will whet your appetite for more. And we do have books on sale here, and you can have them signed. A message from your sponsor. But after reading, we will have some special presentations by Mr. Harford, followed by the official launch of the book and signing. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Ronald Harford.
Thank you. My first reading is about my days at school in Guyana. At school in Guyana, I was very friendly with Richard and Michael da Costa, whose father had come from St. Vincent and was a doctor. Richard and my brother's friends were the Logan and the Driver boys who liked hunting and fishing. A couple of years ago, it was 50 years that we had left St. Stanislaus College, and there was a grand class reunion of all the students. So we went. I didn't recognize many of them, but when I got their names, I was like, ah, this one I know. He was very good at Latin. This one was very good at football. This one was very good at cricket. I turned to one of them and said, "Do you remember us?" And he looked at me and said, "Yeah, I remember. There were two of you." I said, "Yes. Well, there was me and my brother Richard." So he said, "Ah, I know who you are. You are the communist." That's because at school I was studying the German philosopher Hegel, who greatly influenced Marxism. And there's a whole story about me supporting communism and my brother supporting capitalism in the book. My next reading, right, is about bank inspectors. Bank managers are terrified of the inspectors whose job it is to find endless faults with how you're running the operation. At the end of it, you get voluminous strips of paper saying things like, "This lending to Paul Smith looks very generous." Barclays sent 2 inspectors from England to Grenada, one looking into operations and the other into the loans and advances. The sole purpose, I believe, was to make my life a misery. However, I knew the way to handle them was to be friendly with them, so I decided to take them on a picnic to Sandy Island. We took a boat from a beach in Grenada, the Liverpool, and crossed to Sandy Island. As we got off the boat, the boatman said, I want to let you know that last week a smuggler's boat ran aground on the rocks outside there. The boat was destroyed, and the loot was washed ashore. Well, these fit and proper inspectors, very British, almost like policemen, right, said, "Take us, where are we going?" And out between the rocks, in water maybe waist high, were umpteen bottles of scotch and brandy glistening in the sun. The rocks had sort of locked them inside so they couldn't be washed away by the waves, and they were not broken. And there were these two very proper gentlemen hopping about like boys, picking up treasure amongst the rocks that were treacherous and could cut your foot. Did not keep them back. Each of them went home with a couple of bottles of Johnny Walker from the loot. What fun. Then we walked across the island to another bay, and as we arrived, there was one big commotion in the water. Something was going on there. So we ran to see what was happening. A shark had attacked a turtle and had got the turtle by the foot. The turtle was almost on dry land, and the shark was trying to pull it back into the sea. Together with the boatman, we beat the shark off, and we got the turtle. The boatman thought this was absolutely wonderful. They were going to have turtle soup tonight. But he told us, stay away from turtles. When turtles bite, they have scissors drawers, and they cut clean. And if you put a piece of wood in their mouth, it snaps, boop. And if they catch a hand, you're a goner. So now these two inspectors came back with their loot plus a snapping turtle tied upside down in the boat. They had surely what had been a dream visit to the Caribbean for them. I often felt that in business, adding little local color and let people have a good, relaxing, fun time is a good thing. Who wants to sit at meetings all day? The next story is the famous story of the Old Year's Night AGM. It had become clear that Clico wanted to replace John Jardim as managing director of the bank, and they wanted to put their own people on the board. They gave a slate of 4, all of whom none of us at Republic Bank would have wanted on our board. But Jardim was a warrior. Dunbar McIntyre was with him, but he was not in the avant-garde position. Jardim was. He took the bit between his teeth, and he converted the bank into a war machine against Clico and against the union. He and Lloyd Samaru were constantly plotting about what to do about the union and what to do about Clico. We are doing this, we are doing that, we're going to take legal action here and there. Jardim hired Frank Solomon, one of those fierce, combative lawyers, to find a way to stop Clico passing a resolution that would appoint their candidates to the bank's board. After months of argument, they decided there was a case in Australia or New Zealand, I forget which, where the court had ruled that if a shareholder seeks to pass a resolution that does not seem to be in the best interest of a company, the board could refuse to accept the resolution. It has a vague similarity, but Jardim grabbed that and decided that was our bullet to deal with Clico. The 1996 annual general meeting was carded for December the 31st, Old Year's Day. Jardim prepared a speech for Chairman Frank Passotti, who was totally flummoxed by the situation. I don't think he fully appreciated what was going on, poor fellow. This highly accomplished technocrat and public servant had suffered in Republic Bank, believe you me. We went, and I, as the secretary of the company, called a meeting. I called this, I called that, and then came the last item. Resolution put forward by shareholder Clico. Chairman, Jardim pushed this piece of paper in front of the chairman, and Passotti read it saying, we will not be proceeding with this resolution as we are being legally advised that we are in our rights because of the case in Australia and in New Zealand. That is it. And the meeting is now called to a close and we are leaving. The exact text of the address is in Republic Bank's book, A Proud Legacy of Service. All this was orchestrated, of course. Everybody at the head table slapped down their papers, closed their folder, got up, and we marched out to make an exit. What drama. At that time, the room was jam-packed, standing room only. People were outside in queues trying to get in. They knew it was the grand battle of all times. And we couldn't take them in because we had no space. The guards were told not to allow any more shareholders in. We went upstairs, with Victor Mute being left downstairs in the bank, as he was not a director yet, to supervise what was going on. We heard afterwards that Clico director Peter Salvery, who was short of stature, jumped up on the table, shouted he was not accepting this, and that he was now convening a shareholders meeting. Everybody was bawling and screaming at each other, and with that, the lights went off. And since that didn't move them, the sprinklers came on. People were pelting out, and the next morning, we were served with another court case by Clico. We upstairs, all huddled in the managing director's office, Jardim emptied his pockets with keys and old sweet and some rubber bands and a little piece of paper, and he said, "This is the key for this drawer, this is the key for another drawer, and this is the combination for the safe." That was the safe in his office where all the inner secrets of the chairman and the managing director were kept. He got it open and said, "See, that's how you do it." I said, "Okay, close it. Let me see if I could open it." Tick, 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 tick. I tried, but I couldn't open it. He said, "Don't worry, the secretary knows how to open it." And with that, I was made the managing director of Republic Bank. All my friends were at Mocha at the golf course celebrating Olia's night. Alison was waiting for me, and I arrived there maybe a few minutes before midnight and was finally able to relax, celebrate, let's open a bottle, have a drink. My future was laid out for me. I now had to fight to keep this bank together. It was my baby. The last subject is the epilogue. I always had a goal in front of me. The goal was some position where everything would be great and everybody wonderful. It's only later on in my life that I realized the most important thing in life is not the goal, but the journey itself, and that you need to enjoy the journey too. I remember going to a hotel in Cayman, and when afterwards people said to me, "That hotel is one of the best hotels I have ever been to, world class." I realized I went there all the time, and I had no idea, no appreciation for it. My team and I would arrive there at 10 o'clock at night, sleep, at 6 or 7 in the morning, we have breakfast, the car is outside, we visit the branch, we visit this operation, we visit that operation, customers, to see the governor of the central bank, we have lunch, and in the afternoon we catch a flight and we go home. Matter fixed, there we are, off back to Trinidad. If I wanted to leave a lesson here, it is that the journey is life. The journey is life. And the goal, when you achieve it, is very elusive. Don't be like me, working like a torpedo, always aiming for the goal. Enjoy the people, enjoy work, enjoy everything. I was brought up by my father and my mother to work hard. We had to go and mow the lawn, scrub the drains, look after the chickens in the yard. We had plenty of chores. Hard work was a mantra in our house. Both our of my parents were hardworking people, so it was ingrained in us. I think then, as the leader of the bank, I had to set the tone and act as an example. Hard work is observed by people around you, and they get the lesson. As a result, you have a lot of credibility and respect, so hard work was necessary. However, if you demand hard work from your people, you also have to make sure that all the resources they require to do their job are available to them. Otherwise, people get terribly frustrated. Have you ever observed a public works construction site in Trinidad and Tobago? The workers come to dig a hole, but they haven't got the spade. The spade is still to come. So they wait around. When the spade arrives, they don't have enough workmen. When they finally finish digging, they don't have enough sand, and the gravel is coming next week. So the whole job gets drawn out, and it's very inefficient. I made it a mission of mine to make sure my people got what they wanted, because I intended to get what I wanted from them. In the end, we all had fulfillment, and we're part of the journey, which was all pleasant, and I hope that the bank today reflects on my century of endeavor. Good work is like a work of art, and to me, Republic Bank was a work of art. We were building the overall structure and the future of this organization. So whatever we did was a building block. The credit card center, the computer center, the telephone systems, the systems we put in place, and how everything was organized with rules. When everything came together, what a beautiful organization we had. It gave us a lot of enjoyment. However, you learn after a while that there's no better reward than self-satisfaction. Rarely someone is going to come around and tell you, what a lovely painting. And if all else fails, just remember, don't let the bastards get you down. Nil illegitimi Carborundum. So that's the end of my reading. I will now take a few moments to handle some acknowledgements. First of all, I would like to thank God for giving me good health, right, and to enable me to be able to use my talents to finish my book. I would like to thank everybody who's come here today in this inclement weather to join me in the launching of my book. I would like to thank the media for coming as well and for reading the book and recounting my story. I would particularly like to thank Republic Bank Limited, who agreed to underwrite the memoir. It was a great surprise to me when my farewell function was at Hyatt, that Nigel Baptiste got up and said the bank had agreed to underwrite my memoir. It was the furthest thing from my mind, and it took me quite a long time to settle down to think that I should write it. But I did do that after much prodding from many people, including Shafiq, right, who always prodded me, you got to get this book going. I'd like to thank also Arthur Lok Jack's Global School of Business for lending us the auditorium and the facilities here, and to being so cooperative with the team who got together to make this event a success, right? I'd like to thank the caterers, Grapevine Limited, who have organized, I understand, delicious eats and lots of drinks for you after this event. I'd like to thank Associated Brands for Ocho's gifts, which I make sure you get before you leave. They're all for you, and then they are in the next room, right? I'd like to thank all the helpers for the event, right? I'd like to thank my granddaughter, Alexa, and my granddaughter, Ava, and Ella, for all the little work they've done for us in organizing the function. I'd like to thank friends and family. I particularly like to thank Gonzalo and Liz, who have flown in from Miami for this occasion. I'd like to thank Bizzy, who's flown in from Barbados for this occasion. I'd like to thank Suresh and June, who made it possible to be here for the occasion as well. I would like to thank all those who could not be here, who sent in lots of notes in the last day or two. Robert LeHunt, Richard Vasconcelos, Hewitt Williams, the former governor of the Central Bank, Sir Kiffin Simpson, Sam Supersad, Margaret Blackburn from Grenada, right? Lars Soderstrom, who is in Norway at the moment, and of course Mike Gerard, who's back in Miami, right? And as I end off, I have to thank Alice Besson. Alice Besson's brilliance and determination and organization and structure is what got this book going. There I was, lying in bed with a bad foot, had to keep my feet off the ground. I had a bit of COVID, and she would come and sit next to me, and I would recount the stories. She would transcribe it. The following morning, she would bring it back to me and said, okay, you read it and correct it. I would do that right away sometimes, and sometimes not. And with German authority, she says, you have to get it done for me, and you bring it back tomorrow. So sometimes I don't feel like doing these things, right? So I had to obey German rules, and I got it back and sent it back for her, and the product was produced. I'd like to thank also Jerry for providing strategic direction. Where's Jerry? Right? Strategic direction. He is the one who took the big picture and said that you need to put it this way, you need to put it that way, because you know of all the issues in the world, etc. Vast experience. And also, he's the one that I think chose the picture, right? Wonderful, Jerry. And the name of the book, Memoir. We were calling something else, but anyway. So Jerry, right? And as a token of my appreciation, I'd like to call Alice up and make this presentation to her. Thank you, Alice. And most of all, I would like to thank my wife, Alison, who has been my rock, right, through all this. I think I'm an easygoing, nice and easy, putty fella. But in my household, they have a different view of me, right? And therefore, it needs a lot of tolerance to handle me. And my wife has had the required tolerance to see me through this exercise, so the book is completed. Alison, my rock, could you please come forward?
So proud of him. He makes up his mind to do something. Don't get in his way, because he's doing it. No matter what you tell him, that's what is going to be done.
Darling, leave them with a nice impression of me.
Yeah, no. And that is why
All right.
he has his goal set, and this is why he is as he is today. A man of vision and focus, and don't get in his way. And he achieves it, which is most of all.
All right.
The goal.
Thank you. All right. I now formally declare this book launched, and I would like to make 3 small presentations. One to Derwin Howell, as you represent. Not Derwin? Yeah. I'm making one to Derwin to receive it for Republic Bank, right? All right. Thank you, and thank Republic Bank for all the favors that you have given me in getting this book done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, for being this.
Thank you. I don't know if Brian Copeland is here. No? No? Yes? No, he didn't make it. Right? Well, I have a book for the West India and Special Collections on behalf of the Alma Jordan Library in the University of the West Indies, and that's to make sure the book is there, right? So for future posterity, the book can be read. And then I would like to ask Mariano Brown to come forward and to thank him for being so gracious and having all his staff run around cooperating with his function. Thank you. I now turn you back to the MC. I want to let you know in this inclement weather, it's not a good idea to go home right away, right? We have lots of drinks, we have lots of eats, and there's an opportunity for us to chat with each other. Thank you again for coming out and to being here with me on this special moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations. I know a few of you wanted to say a few words, and so we're going to pass around the microphone, if we can just get some. And so just put your hand up if you would like to say a few words. Mr. Lok Jack wanted to say something.
Thank you. Well, Ron and me have one thing in common. We both might have Chinese, but anyhow. and believe you me, I think that they taught us a lot, Ron. But generally speaking, what I like to say is that I'm extremely close to Ron. We're very close friends. And his book is very light reading. But my God, is the book heavy. The book weighs 3.1 pounds. Very, very difficult to read it. So I'm really hoping, and I certainly want to tell you that I don't mind being partially underwriting the softcover version, which I think should be done because that book needs to be read by all young people and people from school ages. And there have been many, many books like that have been written, but somehow or the other seems to get lost. There's another, curiosity too, we went to Queen's Royal College and with Lincoln Phillips, famous goalkeeper, which many of you may or may not know, actually wrote a very good book, Between the Bars, his autobiography, and it was a very, very excellent book. But books like these need to really find their way in the school curriculum in some form or fashion that could give both inspiration and excitement, because it's an exciting book. It's exciting to know what happened after and what happened and here and there. And all the things to do with business and so on. I think it would be a great thing if we can certainly get that type of, somehow or the other, on the curriculum of the schools or somewhere, Ministry of Education or something. But Ron, it's been a very great been knowing you. And Ron likes to tell a story. Not all of it is true, but basically, he tells the story about me working in Barclays Bank. And I'll tell you the truth.
I was a postboy in the bank. I had joined, and I was there for 9 months or a year, because it was kind of place where they rotated people as they came in. But I came in at the time of a recession, so there was not much movement. So one day, in the afternoon, there was a deadly hush in the bank, like there was a death in the place. And everybody was whispering to each other. So I said, what is going on? They said, the cashier in Salvatore building dropped $100,000. Well, I mean, if you drop $100 in the bank, was a big thing. But this one cashier dropped $100,000. With that, Trevor Roston was the manager. He got himself together. John Jodim, who was already over there, went, and they went now to see what was going on. They had a very famous cashier called Arthur Lok Jack. Arthur Lok Jack gave away $100,000 of the bank's money, right? So Jodim and Roston, and I can't remember, was it Fish or one of those kind of names, right? They're going through saying, well, what's going on? But what had happened was he was called upon to take over a till from a cashier who was left-handed. And he put the hundreds where people normally put the tens, right? Okay? So he gave out the hundreds and tens to everybody. Right? Well, deadly into the night, Jardim and the others were searching out all the customers, trying to explain to them that the tens they got were in fact hundreds and they had to give it back, right? And I do think most of them gave it back. There's only one person who didn't give it back, but we won't mention the name. So he will forever be remembered in the bank. It was like death, I'm telling you. Nobody could talk. Yes, I tell you.
Before I hand over to Bizzy, I'd just like to say, in those days, the $100 resembled the $10 very, very, very close. It is not the day where you have a blue note. That wasn't the case in those days.
Thank you very much. I will. I can't agree more with what Arthur has said. Now, on October 1st, I'll read a note that I sent to Ron. Hi, Ron. I don't flatter men, only attractive women. So please take this message seriously. Your memoir has so many guiding principles contained in it that could be beneficial to those who read it, that it should be on Amazon and available on Kindle. In these days of almost unlimited storage, even in small phones that everyone carries with them, your memoir would be available to countless thousands of young entrepreneurs who would benefit a lot from reading it. That was, Ron wrote back to me. He says, thanks for your kind words. The book will be available on Amazon. I'm going to hold you to this, Ron, because I find, as Arthur said, this book is heavy. It's a big thing. And I would much prefer to be able to read it. Sir Kiffin Simpson sent me this phone because he said that he liked to use it, a phone like this to read the Bible on his plane. So he thinks, I think he thought I need to read the Bible. But I also need to read Ron's memoirs again. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much to all of you for being here. I know it's very, very rainy outside. Oh, there's still someone who wants to say something, Chris.
Good evening, Ferdie Ferreira. I think this is an excellent opportunity to extend my thanks to Ron Harford, who I met a few years ago at the home of Selwyn Ryan, and requested him, after a lengthy discussion, to donate 41 copies of a book called The Hubris Syndrome. On speaking to Ron, he became extremely interested and committed himself to sponsoring the book, which he did. I take this opportunity to extend my sincere thanks and appreciation for his service as a good corporate citizen. Thank you, Ron.
And to expand on that, the proceeds of this book go to the Princess Elizabeth Home, a school on Arapita Avenue in Woodbrook for children with special needs. So that's a good corporate citizen. Thank you so much all for being here. Please go and enjoy the refreshments, enjoy reconnecting with each other. Make sure that you sign the guest book as well. And thank you, and all the very best. Congratulations, Mr. Harford, on this huge achievement, and to all of you who have made today possible. Thank you very much. Please get home or to your destination safely. Thank you. It's been my honor to be here today. Thank you.